Hey everyone, welcome to another media training for EXO Academy. I'm joined by Mahreen, who is, our wave. Oh my god, we're on wave three. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Cadet. I think you guys are cadets. I don't know what we officially call you guys. You think I would know these things. Um, so, unlike a lot of the people who we've selected for EXO Academy, you're one of the few people who already has a ton of sponsorships or partnerships going into the academy.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of this training isn't going to be about how do you stay sponsor savvy, because I think you already have that part down. So we're going to start with the same thing that all of the patrons have probably heard me say, which is rule number one of social media is if you wouldn't show it to your grandmother, don't put it on your social media. So
Mm.
so that's for pictures, that's for the way that you would type, just think about what your grandmother wouldn't approve of and avoid putting that on your social media, and for the most part you'll be fine. And then I guess for you, like I said, usually we talk a lot about how do we attract sponsors and all of that stuff. You have them, so I figured that we would just jump straight into how to sort of present ourselves when we're being interviewed. Um, Even though you said you haven't been interviewed before, that doesn't mean it's never going to happen. Especially now that you've been attracting more sponsorships. That's the same thing that P-chan said, but she was like, "Well, I don't think I'm going to get interviewed." And I was like, "I don't know if that's true. You're doing EXO
Anything can
Academy.
happen.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to CEO, which is one of the bigger events that we're doing, right? Final round. We've kind of been scaling up. Final round to combo breaker CEO, so it's kind of a big event. So one of the first things that I always tell people when they're being interviewed is to, one, ask what the person wants to interview you about.
Mm-hmm.
They won't always necessarily tell you pound for pound what all their questions are going to be, but it gives you the ability to sort of mentally prep. And so when you're being asked questions, you already kind of have a frame of mind as to what you want to talk about. This just helps us with the way that we present ourselves, especially if we're doing something like video or audio. It allows us to avoid things like saying and because
Yeah.
yeah, all those fun things. Because the more prepared we are mentally, the less likely we will have to dredge into the deep recesses of our minds to figure out what we're going to do.
So then just to clarify, you said that it's totally okay to ask the interviewee, what would you like to interview me about? Is that totally appropriate,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
is that
yeah.
kind of
So
like
like
too
so like
direct?
let's say
Mhm.
I came up to you at CEO and I'm like, "Hey, I've heard that, you're a brand ambassador for Hori and you're part of EXO Academy. Would it be okay if I interviewed you?" If I don't start off by saying "Hey, this is what I want to talk to you about," it's totally okay for you as the interviewee to be like, "Hey, before I say yes or no, could you tell me a little bit more, whether it's, you care about the outlet that you're being interviewed by, or you want to know more about the interviewer, or you could just be like, "Hey, could you give me, 2, 3 topics that you think we're going to talk about?"
Kind of like a
And
rundown, what do you
yeah,
want to interview? Yeah, sure, okay. Mm-hmm.
because you as an interviewee, you're not powerless, right? It's not like it's a binary choice of yes or no. You could say "Hey, sure, I totally want to interview. I totally am down for this interview, but these are no questions, right? I don't want to talk about
Right.
relationships." Or you could say, let's say you got into some Twitter drama. You can be like, "Hey, I really don't want to talk about that." And
Exactly, sure.
even if they try to surprise you with that type of question in the interview, one of the things that I see people do is they either get really heated about it, or they feel pressured to answer it because now you're in the interview. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
it's just like any other situation. Consent is sexy, so if you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it, right? That doesn't always mean that you have to end the interview and walk away, but you can be like, "I respectfully decline to answer that question." And if they try to
Yeah,
pressure you about
exactly.
it, you don't have to cave.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just the thing I want you to be 100% aware about, is that you don't have to answer anything that you don't want to answer. And there's a bunch of different ways that you can go about it. You can either just say, "Hey, I respectfully decline to answer that question," or you can try to flip the script. and try to get them to reframe it in a way that makes you feel more comfortable. Or you could just end the interview. Just because you said yes to the interview doesn't mean you have to like answer everything.
Yeah, yeah. Like I really like that saying that. Like I respectfully will decline answering that question because you know, everyone has a choice. Like just because you're the interviewer or like the person being interviewed, it's totally okay to say no because they're interviewing you and
Mm-hmm.
they want to know more about you and like you know your part of the FGC, like what you've done and who do you play in the game or whatever. And yeah, it's totally okay to say no.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes whenever I talk to my friends, they get a little hesitant saying no. It's like no, just it's your
Yeah.
answer. You know, you're your own person, so it's okay to say no. Most definitely put your foot down or something. You know.
Mm-hmm. So when the interview gets started, one of the biggest recommendations I make to interviewers, and I also make it to interviewees, is try to do some icebreaker. Try to get the person to open up to you a bit more. This is both if you're doing an interview and if you're being interviewed, because you always want the best version of you to come forward, right? We've all watched interviews at times where it feels like somebody's teeth is being pulled. And that doesn't necessarily, even if the interviewer is kind of garbo, it still reflects poorly on you if there's no chemistry, right? Because no matter what, both of you will come across stiff. So the way to prevent that is to tell a joke before the interview starts. Try to see if there's a connection point. Like especially if it's like CEO, be like, hey, did you enter any games? Are you doing any side events? You know, try to make sure that you're getting the person talking so that when your interview starts, you're already in that sort of natural conversation flow as opposed to just being two complete strangers talking to each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I most definitely agree because sometimes when you just sit there and wait for the interviewee to ask you these questions, I would probably just sit there and be like, okay, so how does this work? Or you know, kind of feel what's the word? You're a little bit anxious,
Yeah.
or you're just kind of stage fright.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that I'm still working on being interviewed and whatnot, but I feel a lot more confident already. I already feel confident talking to you, Amanda. It's great because it feels like I'm already being interviewed by you again because I remember you interviewed me at Canada Cup. So it feels a lot better now. And of course, yeah, I really do agree about that method is, you know, talk to me like, oh, are you a part of Red Bull or have you been enjoying the events lately? All the kind of like small talk, if I were to put it, yeah.
The other thing that I always recommend is when you are being interviewed and there's a question that you're not necessarily prepared for, unless it's a video interview, you don't have to answer the question right away. So in a situation where like someone's got like a voice recorder in your face and there's no camera, you can just pause, right? You can just think about what you want to say. A lot of times when we're being interviewed, we feel pressured to automatically fill space, especially in conversations where we're like, oh man, there's awkward silence. But like an interview, unless it's a video interview, or I guess if it happens to be an audio interview for a podcast, you don't always have to fill that space. And even with an audio interview, they can just cut out the dead air. And the reason that I say this is it goes back to sort of that talking about not saying like so. We say that because we're trying to figure out what we want to say, how we want to bridge the information. And if we do that, if we don't give ourselves time to think, we're more likely to have awkward pauses in our speech, to say and like. So it's just a great way to allow you the ability to sound your best. And if you haven't noticed, I'm about to touch on my next favorite thing, which is talk like you write. What that means is talk with periods. A lot of times, especially those of us from areas known for talking fast, like us this New Yorker here, is that we sometimes talk quickly, and so then we kind of get out of breath, and then the next thing you know, we're like searching to fill that awkward space. So like start to come in. So try to talk a little bit slower and more pronounced. So try to use periods when you talk so that you give yourself time, catch your breath, maybe allow the person to interject. Because if we're just talking like we're talking with a run-on sentence, we're not allowing ourselves a lot of room to breathe, to think about what we want to say next, and we're also potentially keeping people out of the conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, most definitely. I do agree because I do catch myself saying like, so, and the likes because I I really can't think of what to say when, let's say, if I'm talking to you or if I'm talking to anyone in XO, I'm just sitting here like, yeah, I think that's pretty cool or something like that, you know? Like, yeah, here's my opinion, my half-assed opinion. I know I totally agree with that because it's better to just pause and think what you're going to say instead of giving the person kind of like like I said, a half-assed answer. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's
For
perfect.
sure.
Yeah, it's perfectly fine. It was actually really funny. I was recently doing an interview with a Overwatch League player,
Oh, cool. Sure.
and he's pretty young. I think he's like 19 or something.
Oh,
And
wow.
you
Fresh
could
out of high school.
yeah, and you could hear at times in the interview that he
Mhm.
was like a little uncomfortable, and he was always quick to like jump to answer my question on the phone. And I was like, hey,
Mhm.
hey, hey, let's take a deep breath. This is a conversation. You don't need to answer things right away. You can take your time and think about it. And it made him a little bit more comfortable. And
That's good.
that's something that I stressed in the previous EXO trainings, and I really stress. And this is also people who watch this, patrons. A lot of this media training stuff, especially the interview section, it's really good for what do you it's
Listen
really
to Amanda.
yeah, it's really good for when you're like interviewing for a job.
Mhm.
A lot of this interview 101 stuff is also really good when you're being interviewed for a job or being because it's all about putting your best self forward. And so a lot of these tactics allow you to sound and look your best when you're being interviewed. So make sure to use these tips. Use them. They're good for you.
Yeah, I remember on my last interview, or actually IRL interview,
Mm-hmm.
I honestly felt so bad because I know that they would want you to, think out your answers and, of course, give it your full, honest answer. The interviewee asked me a question that I literally had to think about because in my head I was like, "Oh my gosh, how do I answer that?" And it was a long, awkward minute of me thinking of what to say. It was honestly in my heart. I thought it was really bad because I felt that he thought I wasn't confident enough in my answers because I took that long to think about what I wanted to say. But uh, that's about it. I didn't get the job, unfortunately, but it's a learning experience for sure, though.
I actually bring this up in. I bring this up a lot. There's a little trick that you can use before you answer a question that allows you to adequately prepare the person talking to you when you're going to fill that space with dead air. And that's, it's going to sound really corny, but you can always say something like, "That's a really good question. I hadn't thought about that." And then,
Yeah.
so like from like the jump, you fill that like you hear it, you process the question, and then you immediately say something to that effect, and then it cues the person in that their question might have taken you by surprise, which is never a bad thing. They don't, when you're being interviewed, no one expects you to just be like a repository of information, right? You're not some like data center where we like put in a query and then like answer comes up, right? That's not how any interview works. This is like, that's not how any conversation works. So if you cue the person in that, "Oh man, that was a really great question. I hadn't really thought of something like that. Give me a moment. Take your time, collect your thoughts, and even if you haven't fully thought out your answer, you're giving yourself somewhat of a buffer so that you can start talking. And as you talk, hopefully your stream of consciousness kicks in. It's similar, right, to when you play fighting games and you play with a flowchart, right? When somebody does something that you like didn't expect, you like hope that you block it, and then you're like, all right, well, this situation, I should be able to do something like this. And when that input goes well, then you're like, all right, now that happened, I can do X, Y, Z. It's the same thing in an interview scenario. If you give yourself the ability to have that buffer of, oh man, I never thought about a question like that. Give me a second so I can say what I want to say, right? Mm-hmm. That gives you sort of that breathing room to tackle it, and then you can hit it with your flow chart that you normally would have when you're answering questions.
Mm.
I try to use fighting game analogies as best as I can, but I'm a boosted bonobo, so like.
Oh yeah, most definitely. Yeah, I agree about you saying, "Oh, that's a good question. I never really thought about that," because it shows that, or the interviewer that, oh, now she's got to think of an answer now.
Mm-hmm.
Oh. You kind of froze up there.
Oh, I was just agreeing. I was saying, mm-hmm.
Oh. But yeah, just thinking about, oh, that's like a good question. I never really thought about that. Honestly, I never really thought about that buffer,
Yeah.
So vice versa. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just a very easy tactic, because one of the problems with not automatically filling the space is that the other person we're not telepaths, right? We don't know what each other is thinking. And so when we don't instantly fill that space, the person goes, well, did you hear me? Did she understand what I said? Maybe she just doesn't have an answer, or, maybe the question was too complicated, but just giving them that reassurance that, like, they were heard and that you're thinking about what they're saying just makes the situation stay comfortable, so that, because what could happen, right, if you don't give that buffer, is maybe that person goes, well, did you hear me? And then you're still trying to think about their question. You're like, yeah, I heard you. And then they're like, all right, well, then what do you have to say? And it could potentially, doesn't always, but it can lead to sort of a slightly antagonistic situation where the person's trying to get the answer out of you and you're still not ready to give one. So then it just becomes more and more pressured. And then that's definitely when our speech starts to fall apart. The more pressured we feel, the less well we're going to sound. It's similar to like when you have to do a class project, right? And you didn't actually prepare to talk in front of the class. And so you just being like, yo, so what happened was, in chapter 4, Romeo said this, and, it was kind of like that moment, right? Like we start, that BS talk starts to kick in. So having that buffer just, reassures your interviewer, because we're fragile people. Us interviewers, we're pretty not self-assured people. So like we need people to boost our egos. So just let us know we're heard.
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly. So then does that help alleviate the situation where, let's say, the interviewee says, or the interviewer says, oh, can you repeat that question again? I feel like if you were to say that, isn't that kind of a little bit rude in a way, or...
So
you're not listening to the question,
The base assumption that you might think is like, oh man, that might be rude of me to say. The actuality is sometimes you just don't hear what a person says, right? Like, I speak really fast, and so sometimes people have trouble understanding me because I talk really quickly. So it's totally okay to be like, hey, I don't know if I heard you correctly. Could you say that again? Sometimes it's not necessarily the I didn't understand the question part that's the problem. It's just the way you deliver it, right? If you say like, hey, could you say that again? That might trigger somebody, even though they might not say it, that you weren't necessarily listening at the time. But if you say, hey, I'm having trouble understanding, I don't really understand that question, could you maybe rephrase it? Right? Make it a little bit more about yourself, so that way it doesn't make the other person feel like they're not being heard. And while it might, to a lot of you and to a lot of you listening and to you, feel like, hey, well, if you didn't understand the person, you didn't understand the person. The points of an interview is not, even though I call it a conversation, it's not necessarily a normal conversation. In a normal conversation, right, I don't ask you I don't ask you all of these questions back and forth, and do deep dives, right? In my regular day, I don't ask my roommate Matt, why did he go into game design, right? That doesn't always come up, and what was that video game that made him want to be a game designer? Like, that might come up in a one shot question, but it doesn't come up in like a flow chart. I'm never asking him the flow chart of his life. So like interviews aren't real conversations like that. So you want to make sure that everybody's just always at a net neutral place. And so saying something to the effect of, hey, I don't really understand that question. Could you, maybe rephrase it if you didn't understand them or if you didn't hear it? It just makes it not feel like one person is doing more work in the conversation than the other.
Sure. Right, exactly. It's better than just to assume that you understand, because I feel like that would cause some complications there.
Yeah.
For sure. I agree.
And when I say, this is more for the patrons, when I say antagonistic, I don't mean like you're being, like the person thinks you're being rude. It just means that like you're moving the barometer from net neutral to like negative or positive, right? So like when I say antagonistic, we're just moving that barometer towards negative when we could just either leave it net neutral or try to scale it towards positive. That's what I mean by antagonistic. It's not in that traditional sense of like, Maureen's trying to fight her interviewer, right? That's not what we're saying here. What we're saying is that we're just trying to keep the barometer at neutral or heading towards positive. We don't ever really want it to tilt towards negative because you, the audience, are going to pick up on that in an interview. Like that's just like a general thing that is going to happen. And the whole point of this training is to make sure that everybody is always putting their best foot forward so that every time somebody's in front of a camera, you're getting like the super awesome collector's edition version, not the Chinese street corner brand X action figure. Bootleg. Where now she's blonde and has green eyes. Although that might be a look.
That would be really cute, though.
All right, so let's say the interview's done, and you guys are about to wrap up. One of the first things that you should do is ask them for a business card or ask them for contact information. There's a few reasons for this. One, you want to say, hey, this interview is really great. Thank you so much for your time. When do you think this interview is going to go live? Do you think it's going to go up next Tuesday, Thursday, whatever, right? Because, and this is both good for your branding, and I think Mama Dow goes over this a little bit, but organic tweets do better than retweets. So when the interview goes live, sure, hit that retweet that retweet button, but also craft your own tweet. And the reason for this is, think of it this way. How many times when you're on Twitter do you click a link that was just base retweeted?
Oh, wait, hold on. Okay, no, we're good. My computer just went to sleep.
Oh.
I haven't even touched my phone.
You're still here.
Yeah.
So think of it this way. How many times when you're on Twitter and you just see a generic retweet, do you click on the link?
Well, how would I put it? I would click, let's say if my friend got sponsored, I would rather see her tweet about it.
Yeah.
Because how I see it is that they tweet it out to people that do support them. Because it has more of a, how should I put it? Like a target audience, or I really don't know how to put it.
Sorry, I get what you're saying. That's why I say it's better for you to do organic tweets for things like this, because you also want your forget the other dude, right, who interviewed you and his clicks or whatever. You want your audience to see this other version of you, right? Like you want your audience to know that in that interview you said something really dope, right? So you want your audience to see that, and your audience has signed up for you. They haven't signed up for the things that necessarily you retweet about. They signed up because you're funny or you're good at lore or something. So if you tweet out the video link, the article link, they're more likely to click on it than if you just retweet some random website or some random YouTube thing. So the other reason for asking for when it's going to go live and doing an organic tweet is also self-serving. It's not just about the outlet. It's also about you. You want people to see you, because the more people see you, the more likely you get more sponsorships. The more likely you get more sponsorships, the more you can do this whole full-time fighting game thing that everybody wants to do.
Yeah, most definitely. I agree, because when I became a brand ambassador for Hori, I simply quote retweeted their tweet, And I said, "Hey guys, I'm a brand ambassador for Hori. I'm very excited." And it received a bunch of likes and replies, and I believe retweets compared to the original tweet that Hori made. So I guess maybe also putting in, your own personality into
Mm-hmm.
it also grabs all of your supporters, grabs other people that see you succeeding, getting a sponsorship, going to tournaments and whatnot. It's super cool, and I really do kind of see that. I wouldn't say, I really don't know how to put it, like, not flow chart,
Mm-hmm.
but more of a, what your audience wants to see, and they want to see what you tweet, what you
Mm-hmm.
retweet, what you talk about, and whatnot.
Yeah, it's pretty much that simple. Now,
Mm-hmm.
usually I would talk about how to gain followers and stuff, but you're already pretty good at that. So what we're going to talk about is something that I usually say for the very very end, because unlike the previous one, guys, this is not going to be an hour. We don't need an hour this time. We're gonna do like half an hour. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I definitely want to talk about is and see, I'm messing up my talking because I haven't been practicing in a while. Is how to practice to talk.
Yes.
Now, a really great way to do this, and I don't have the handy dandy book. It's all the way in another room. I have this like book. I have this Tokidoki book, and it's like
Cute.
365 questions.
Mm.
So it's like a writing prompt journal. And what I usually do in this section is I ask you a random question. And the reason I ask you a random question is this: the more practice you get just answering questions, the better you'll get when you have to talk on camera and stuff, because you're more used to talking in a structured manner, right? And what do we do more? Do we talk to our friends more, or do we talk in front of a camera more?
Talk to your friends more, for
Right?
sure.
Right? So we have way more casual speaking experience than we do public speaking experience. And a way to combat this issue is to practice our public speaking. Because even when you stream, you're not really practicing your public speaking, right? You're putting
Just
on,
memeing out.
right? Yeah. So if we practice our public speaking more, we develop that muscle, right? It's just like playing an instrument, practicing our combos. The more we do it, the better we're going to be at it, even if we're not doing it every single day. So what I'm going to recommend is that I'm going to send you just like a stock list of questions, and then once a day I want you to just practice doing single takes, like with your cell phone, or you can use your webcam, and then just play it back and sort of self-critique. Did you say how many times did you say And the thing I want you to do is I don't want you to stop the video to start it again, right? If you hear yourself say or you hear yourself say like, or you don't think that you pronounce the word correctly, I don't want you to stop and start, because you're not necessarily improving that way. Because when you're being interviewed live or something, you can't just like stop, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like why they say that actors who do movies have trouble transitioning back to stage, because when you mess up a take on stage, the director doesn't go cut and then you start the scene from a different place. You just gotta keep going. Similarly to public speaking, we don't always get a chance to stop and start. And especially with public speaking, if you're constantly starting over, right, it just sounds like you're stumbling even more. So this is why it's better to practice your one takes, meaning
Mm-hmm.
that it's better to how well can you speak in a single take?
I know that I will buffer a lot. You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
that's fine.
Yeah, I will buffer a lot, and I would just kind of think of what to say. And I'm pretty sure I would say, like, a lot in
Yeah.
one take.
So that's why doing this on a daily basis and just watching yourself do these videos, like, they're not for YouTube, they're not for Twitter, they're not for Instagram. I mean, if you want to put them up, you can. But the main purpose is just sort of self-reflection and review, because the more practice you get at one takes, the better your public speaking is going to get. Like when I was
Sure.
doing one takes 5 days a week for a month for a content challenge, all of my public speaking like went through the roof for like that whole month, because I was constantly having to like sit and think about what I want to say and then say it. So in the
Mm-hmm.
same vein, what I'm gonna do after this is I'm gonna ship you like 10 questions, and then for 10 days I want you to film doing one takes, so basically like 1 to 2 minute videos answering that question. And you don't have to show them to me. I don't really care how bad or good you do. I mean, if you want to, you can. I tell everybody that they want to, they can. It's literally just about how you feel when you answer a question and getting comfortable in that public speaking manner. Because as soon as we put a camera on ourselves, even though we know nobody's gonna watch it, we're still like, oh man, I'm talking in front of a camera, so it's different now. Like we're already mentally framed that way, and
Mm-hmm.
so you don't necessarily need to upload it. But it's not bad to do video content on a regular basis. But you already know these things. So, do you have any questions for me?
No, you actually answered all the questions that I was going to ask you,
Oh,
especially
really? Thanks.
during about interviewing and the buffering and whatnot. I never knew all these terms that you came that they are actually, how should I put it, like mm, they are actually valid terms. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
People know these terms and whatnot, and it's just really cool knowing that because I know I didn't take public speaking. I know I probably took it in middle school and I don't even remember. But just knowing that I'm not like I'm in the same boat as some people who do have a hard time getting interviewed because of course I say like and I try to think of words from the back of my head and I kind of make the interviewee kind of awkward like all right yeah. So thank you so much, Amanda. I really do appreciate it and I will most definitely look at the stock questions
Mm-hmm.
and go through them and figure out, okay, so how am I going to answer this? And how will I perfectly execute my answer
Just
for
think of
this
it like
given
your
question?
combos and your mix-ups.
Yeah. So,
Well, like that's the thing, right? Like no one is born knowing how to do things. Sure,
hmm
there are some super outliers of people who are naturally good at a thing, but even like
hmm
my public speaking skill is something that I had to learn. Right?
Yep.
I went to
It
school for
takes practice.
journalism. I practice every day. You know, I still mess up. And it's mainly because all these EXO Academy trainings are like at like 9, 10 p.m. for me because I live on the East Coast and all y'all live on the West Coast like weirdos. But you're not born knowing all this information, and that's why
Mhm.
you see athletes mess it up, right? That's why you see normal people mess it up. It's because this isn't a normal thing. Being interviewed is not a normal part
It's
of your
common,
life.
sure.
So
Mm,
it's not unbelievable that you don't know how to create space in an interview. And the reason
mm-hmm.
I know this is because I do interviews for a living. I interview people. And so I think
Yes.
about what the techniques are that people should be implementing to make a smooth interview.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
I don't have any questions, Amanda. Do you have any questions for me?
No, I guess not really because, like I said, one of the difficulties of doing a training like I did with you or like I had to do with Romanova is that it's two people who already have a following that already
Mhm.
do a lot of social media work, that already do a lot of media things, and already do a lot of media things correctly.
Mhm.
So it sort of slashes half of the lesson out because like part of the lesson is like how not to mess up on the internet and
Oh, yeah.
you already I don't think I've ever seen like I mean you have spicy takes but I've never been like ooh girl you did not you shouldn't have said that you shouldn't have that was
Me,
not
spicy
yeah
take? Like what tweet?
I don't I don't memorize your tweets. All right,
Huh, now I'm curious.
or I guess like you've never had a tweet that I was like she's canceled.
Mm.
All right, that's more what I mean. You've never tweeted something where I'm like, this chick is canceled. Time to hit that unfollow and mute button. I've had to do that with some people in the FGC. Some people just get straight muted, and then like I don't ever have. They get banished to the
Yeah.
shadow realm. You know, like
Yeah,
Mordekaiser.
I just feel like people just know me for the memes. I know I have talked to Carolyn about it, and she told me that she used to retweet a lot of memes, but once she started working at Capcom, she how should I put it? She stopped tweeting memes because she wants to keep that professional look for her social media pages. So I know I have been keeping it light for me as well because in the past before I got sponsored by Hori, and of course working with all you great
Mm-hmm.
people at EXO, I started to just kind of like them, or I just post the meme in Discord, in my Discord, and be like, "Hey guys, look at this! It's pretty funny." But yeah, I know that I have been posting a lot, but then I know I try to post not as much because I want people to look at me as a professional Street Fighter Five player, and I'm looking to get sponsored, and I'm looking to work with any other brands out there. So yes,
So
I am lessening it up.
here is a piece of advice that I will give you, and that is,
Sure.
this is something that came up in an interview with Anti. Don't worry too much about, like, if you want the super professional, like, I don't meme to be your brand, that's cool. But we all know how Smug acts, right? Right? We all know the handshake mix-ups, the really corny jokes, the over-the-top entertainment. That's his brand. And any sponsor who is going to want that is going to want that, right? If you want a meme, that's perfectly fine.
Because that's my personality.
Correct. So what you need to learn is, one, how to make your own organic memes, you know, or make sure that you have like a twist so that it's more about your personality and brand than just, you know, some like trash panda who just shares every meme on the internet. You can have a personality. You can have a brand. One of the things that people think when they want to become sponsored is I have to become like this squeaky clean person and like basically like vanilla ice cream. You don't have to be vanilla ice cream. You can be like Rocky Road. You can have flavor and different pieces of yourself. You just have to make sure that what you're doing is you're aware that that's what you're putting out there. So if you are okay with memeing and you want to make that a part of your brand, that's fine. People like it. Just like know that, like, you know, sometimes that might not attract certain types of sponsors.
Sure.
So don't think that you have to like stop doing a thing because you want to become a sponsored player. Right? Like Sonic Fox is sponsored. Have you seen his timeline?
I avoid his timeline.
What? But you know what I mean? Like, it's like he's
Yes.
And like, sure, some people could make the excuse like, oh, well, you know, it's Sonic Fox. He wasn't always, oh, he's Sonic Fox, right? Like, he had to also, you know, earn his way. It's the same thing. Like, do what makes you feel comfortable, and that's what's definitely going to sort of attract people. I will say that if you ever need, like, you already have it, which I guess this was going to be the next statement I was going to make, and then you brought it up organically, which is you have another space to sort of be the sort of full uncut version of yourself, which in your case is your Discord. You know, I tell people, you know, make a private Twitter if they want, right? You know, that
sure.
Like, I have a private Twitter, and I don't care who follows it. I don't even give out the link very often. The only reason people know about it is it's my old Twitter handle, and I just vent on it because, like, sometimes it's hard. Like, you can't tweet about it because somebody's gonna find it, and even if you delete it, sometimes people find it anyway. Or, you know, Facebook, you know, people screenshot your Facebook and shit.
Yeah,
so, like,
and sometimes they, like, press it on you or something like that.
Yeah, so for me, I just, like, have the private Twitter so that I can, you know, be the full uncut me and not have to worry about consequences.
Sure.
You can do the same thing on your Discord and just be the full uncut you on Discord and not worry too much. But, yeah, I think that's it. I think we are done. Yes. Patrons, thank you for supporting us. The more you support, all of your support allows us to, you know, send wonderful people like her to CEO and allows, you know, us to keep supporting more women in the FGC. So make sure that you keep supporting us and make sure that you spread the word. Make sure you get other people to support us so that our power can grow.
Yes.
Have a good evening. I know you're about to go stream.
Yes, I am about to stream here shortly, so...
Woo! All right, folks. Until next time, go beyond plus ultra.
Bye!